Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1991 comedy, What About Bob? Now, What About Bob is honestly one of my favorite comedies of the 90s. It's also one of my personal favorite Bill Murray movies. This is a film that I've always found to be enjoyable and rather humorous. Um, from the very first time that I saw it on television when I was a kid, and every time since. This is, in my opinion, one of those comedies that is a genuine classic. I have no idea why this is not on Blu-ray though. That is something that I really don't understand. This DVD is okay, but it definitely is one of those early touchstone DVD releases that has picture quality that's not necessarily the best in the world. Um, this film deserves way better than it's getting on physical media, that's for sure. But that's a whole other story. But before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the film, I would like to give a special shout out to Mark for requesting this video. And if there is another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal, my Patreon, or my Cash App. The link to all three is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your requests as soon as I possibly can. Now, What About Bob is directed by Frank Oz. And Frank Oz, for many, many years, was known as a Muppet guy. Because of that, he also collaborated on other films that Henson was a part of, like The Dark Crystal, and he was really more well known for his puppet work. He even took that and utilized that experience in films like The Little Shop of Horrors. But in 1988, he got the opportunity to direct a comedy called Dirty Rotten Scoundrels with Steve Martin and Michael Caine. And that was his first film that he did that really wasn't like very puppet focused. So I think because of that experience, directing that film and doing a good job, that really set himself up for success when it comes to What About Bob? I still think that this is one of his best films as a director. And it's not because it's the most technically impressive. It's sound. It's very solid in terms of the framing and the shot selection and the camera angles and so on and so forth. And I really do feel he does a great job emphasizing the tension between the two leads, as well as the smaller, softer, more somber moments at points throughout the movie, and maintaining the right tone and the right vibe overall throughout the film. But I think Oz, he really showcases his talent with this film in particular because of how he was able to handle such a difficult production. This is a film that featured not only one nightmare star in Bill Murray, who came in with his Murricane again, but also another in Richard Dreyfuss. So you had these two volatile, just completely destructive egos colliding on the set every day. And it got so bad that Murray's like throwing things at Dreyfuss, saying that he's tolerated, and it's just a mess. And it's the kind of thing that I feel with a lesser filmmaker, with somebody who really wasn't up to the task, it could have completely spiraled out of control. But because of the fact that Oz is somebody who can handle such chaos, it leads to a end result that is honestly great. The animosity between the two leads and Bill Murray and Richard Dreyfuss, it was instead weaponized in the film's favor, and in a lot of ways due to Oz and how he found a way to make this all work despite everything that was going against him. So, because of that, this really does stand the test of time as one of his best films because this was such a difficult production. And for him to not only do a good job, but turn out a end product that is still very well received to this day and wound up becoming one of the highest grossing comedies of 1991, that is quite a feat. What About Bob is written by Tom Schulman. Now, Tom Schulman, prior to writing this film, was on a bit of a hot streak. He had written the script for the Dead Poets Society. He was a co-writer on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Yes, he also was a co-writer on the box office bomb that was Second Sight, but I'll give him a mulligan on that one because then he followed that up with his screenplay for What About Bob, which I still feel is one of his better scripts in his career. And honestly, his last good screenplay, because after this, he really fell off. I mean, he would go on to write films like Eight Heads in a Duffel Bag and Holy Man and Welcome to Mooseport and Medicine Man. So yeah, he really took a major dive in terms of his quality as a writer after this film. But hey, at least he had a good run there. I mean, that's more than some writers can say because I've seen writers who are like just one hit wonders. They do one good screenplay and then don't do anything worth of note or worth a shit for years and years afterwards. So I don't think that Schulman is one of those people. This screenplay, it's a story that isn't that complicated or that complex, and it deals with a scenario involving a therapist and a patient that has been done before. So it's not super unique in that regard, but because of the quality of the comedy and the darker comic elements mixed with some genuinely heartwarming scenes, this turns into a genuine gem of a screenplay, in my opinion. The story involves this therapist named Dr. Leo Marvin, who is really on the cusp of breaking out and becoming a big name in the therapy field. He's got a book coming out called Baby Steps, and he actually has booked a interview on Good Morning America. But there's one thing standing in his way, and it's a new patient of his called Bob Wiley, who is a neurotic, obsessive patient who essentially was dumped on him by some of his colleagues because they couldn't handle him anymore. And Bob decides to find a way after his first meeting with Leo to figure out where Leo is in terms of where he's at on his vacation and stalks him and winds up following Leo to his home. And I can see why some people would look at this as being maybe like the plot for a horror movie or something. And some people have edited trailers for this movie that really do exemplify this rather well. But somehow, Schulman takes what is honestly a terrifying concept in theory and makes it into a fun time. So I think a big part of it is how Bob is written. Bob is neurotic, Bob is obsessive, but Bob doesn't really come across like he'd hurt anybody. he definitely comes across like he's somebody who would go as far to lie and ultimately stalk and follow his therapist back to his home out of state. That does seem like something that Bob would do, but you never really get the sense that he was going to hurt Leo or hurt Leo's family. Really, you get more of a sense that Bob could possibly hurt himself in the process because of how helpless he seems at the beginning of the story. And despite the way Bob is, you do feel a certain sense of sympathy for him because of the fact that he has all these issues and he's trying to get some help through therapy, but he keeps having problems in terms of having a breakthrough. Either he has a problem or his therapists have a problem or it's a bit of both. And I think because of that, you definitely do feel for him a little bit. I mean, the guy can barely even go out in public without having a near panic attack. And yeah, he's annoying, but it's in a way that I think is still funny without being mean-spirited. And I think that's really the balance that the writer is able to achieve with this script. And I think it's something that's a lot harder than it might seem. Because there's a lot of films that deal with some kind of similar character as Bob, but they turn out to be obnoxious and they don't work on the same level because there's not really that much endearing qualities about these people. They're just obnoxious and annoying and self-centered and doesn't really seem like there's any likable qualities about them. And they're also not funny. They are just annoying. But I never really felt that way about Bob. I mean, his first meeting with Dr. Marvin is just full of comedy gold. The bits when he's talking about all the different symptoms that he has, and then the whole thing where he's talking about his fear of getting Tourette syndrome, or the bit about him talking about his fear of his bladder exploding, or when he's talking about how he got his divorce and just how absurd it is, and it has something to do with Neil Diamond. Like, then you have the baby steps thing where he just starts using the baby steps method in an absolutely uproarious fashion where he's all just going baby steps to the elevator, baby steps to the elevator. And then he gets in the elevator and he screams, and then he's like, baby steps down the stairs, baby steps down the stairs. So there's a lot of really fun stuff in those sequences and those scenes and some really funny bits. And these hilarious but kind of twisted scenarios continue because then you have Bob faking his own suicide to get information in order to be able to find out where Dr. Leo is. And he finds out that the Marvins are at Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. And Bob winds up taking a bus to Lake Winnipesaukee. He's irritating all of the other passengers along the way. He then encounters Leo at a local coffee shop, and Leo is understandably shocked and surprised that Bob is here. And he tries to find a way to get rid of Bob by saying, I'll talk to you, but you have to promise me that after we talk, you'll get on the bus and you'll go back home. Because I'm on vacation. I don't take patients while I'm on vacation. And he tells Bob to wait for him at this coffee shop and he'll show up later at a certain time, and well, actually he'll call at a certain time on the phone and then they can talk. But Bob winds up meeting these townspeople who overheard everything, and they're disgruntled and bitter because Dr. Marvin bought their dream house. So they wind up telling Bob where Dr. Marvin lives. And not only that, they drive Bob right up to Leo's front door. And I thought that was really clever. Some really great writing there by Schulman because of the fact that a weaker script and a lazier screenwriter would just do something where, oh, Bob would do some kind of thing where he would throw his voice and act like he's some other character and call the Marvins by finding their phone number in the yellow pages or something, and then the wife or one of the kids would pick up and they would wind up giving him the address, which is just completely forced and ridiculous. But they didn't do that. The writer did not do that. Instead, the writer wound up providing a genuinely plausible reason as to why Bob would ultimately find Dr. Marvin's house. And then at this point, things really start to escalate when it comes to the contentious back and forth between Bob and his therapist, Dr. Marvin. Dr. Marvin at this point is under all of his pressure because he's got this big interview coming up for Good Morning America, and he's trying to promote this book, and he's on the cusp of a big breakthrough in his career. But now he's got Bob to deal with on what was supposed to be his vacation. And that then not only that, Bob starts ingratiating himself into Leo's family. And Leo's family doesn't see Bob the same way that Dr. Marvin does. They see this other side of him because he's started to break out of his shell. He started to become more confident in himself. He's no longer as neurotic. He has his moments, but he's nowhere near as bad as he was when Dr. Marvin first saw him. So all Marvin's family sees is this guy who has been sheltered and hasn't had a lot of opportunities to just let loose and have fun without worrying about things too much. And they see him as this nice guy who's just fun to be around. And that leads to hilarious scenes like when Bob goes sailing. I'm sailing. I sail. Or the whole bit with Bob at the dinner table where he's just going over the top when it comes to his praise for Dr. Marvin's wife and her cooking. He's just going crazy over Faye's cooking, and he's all like, "Oh, these corn on the cobs. Did you hand shuck these?" Or when he's just going overboard with the mouth noises when he's eating all this food, and he's just going, "Mmm, mmm, mmm, mmm," and then Dr. Marvin is just progressively more and more upset and pissed at the dinner table to the point where he finally explodes. It's like, would you just stop that? Please. And as the story goes on, Bob becomes less of a neurotic guy. He becomes less afraid of things. He becomes less of a germaphobe. He befriends not only Dr. Marvin's wife, but also his kids. He's the one that winds up helping Leo's son, Siggy, actually uh, dive and get over his fear of diving. And they have this fun thing that they do with one another involving Tourette's where they start just yelling insults at each other. And this is just increasingly causing more and more stress for the therapist, understandably so. And he eventually starts to crack. You have just hilarious scene after hilarious scene at this moment in time when Leo is just completely starting to crack under all this pressure. So you have moments like when Dr. Marvin is talking about Bob and how he's not gone because his family, they were trying to tell him that Bob left. He's no longer here. And then Dr. Marvin is like, "You think he's gone? He's not gone. That's the whole point. He's never gone." And then Leo opens the door and there's Bob just standing there and he's like, "Is this some radical new therapy?" And then Dr. Marvin is just like, "You see?" So these moments when Dr. Marvin just explodes are really, really funny. And they're really well done by Schulman. And his gradual descent into madness is so very well put together by the writer. And it's really no better exemplified than in this scene that always cracks me up, where Dr. Marvin has actually tried to pawn Bob off to a institution at this time, because this is after the interview with Good Morning America was a disaster, and it was only salvaged because of Bob, who now looks like a hero, and he's now like some kind of household name, and everybody's talking about Bob now after the interview. They're not talking about Dr. Marvin unless they're talking about him choking on live television. So he has completely had it with Bob at this point. There's no more patience left for Dr. Marvin when it comes to Bob. So he tries to use some of his connections to send Bob to a mental institution. But it backfires because Bob is just so personable and so charismatic and so funny that he makes all of the people at the institute laugh. So they don't even think that he's crazy. So they just wind up giving him back to Dr. Marvin. And the drive back after Dr. Marvin picks him up, in my opinion, it's the comic height of this film and of this screenplay. So you have Bob riding in Leo's car and he's talking to Leo. "It was an interesting morning, fruitful, but it lacked the intensity that you and I generate together, the sparks that we get one on one. We just got to figure out a way to work around your schedule. Could we work afternoons? 2 to 4? 3 to 5? Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday?" And then Dr. Marvin just cracks and just screams at the top of his lungs, "Ah!" He slams the brakes, gets out of the car, walks around, opens Bob's door. "Are you saying that you'd rather work mornings?" And then he just Dr. Marvin just in just an absolute bout of gibberish just pulls the door open and then goes, "Get out of the car! Get out of the car!" It is so funny. It is such a funny scene. And it's still funny after that when you get to the really dark stuff, where Leo has now decided, after his surprise birthday party completely goes sideways, he decides to kill Bob. And he sets up this thing where he's going to trick Bob into thinking that he's going to be getting some therapy, in this instance, death therapy, because he's going to blow Bob up. And just that concept, it is so twisted, but also really brilliant and really good and really clever. And the way it's executed is great. Because now Dr. Marvin is completely and totally unhinged at this point. He has completely lost his mind. And Bob, though, he's still oblivious. He doesn't think that Marvin is serious about killing him. He thinks that it's just another way where Dr. Marvin, through some unorthodox means, finds a way to cure Bob. And so Bob winds up coming up with this wild theory in his head that this is actually how he's able to overcome his fear of death, and he somehow finds a way to get out of his bonds. And then Dr. Marvin thinks that Bob is blown up at this point. He's dead. And he's with his family. And then Bob shows up alive. And then, of course, Dr. Marvin's like, oh, what? And then he quickly realizes that things are just completely upside down, even more than they already are. And he's panicked. He's like, what happened to the bomb that I said that was made out of the tree stump explosives? Where is that? And Bob's like, oh, I left it in the house. And then the house just explodes into a ball of fire. And what happens after that moment is a bit clunky, I will admit, because now you have a wedding with Bob and Leo's sister, and Leo is in a comatose state because of this whole experience with Bob. And him being in a comatose state isn't really the problem. The problem is Bob and Leo's sister getting married. You didn't really get the idea that the two were romantically interested in one another based on one scene. You got an idea that she respected him and thought that he was a fun guy, but you never really got the hint that they were gonna elope. So I think that's missing a little bit something to make that feel like it's not just something that's just forced in there for the sake of the script. That is like the one point with this script where I really think Schulman wasn't on his A game. Because every other point in this screenplay is really solid, really good stuff. The main plot, how it unfolds, how you have this really interesting dynamic that evolves throughout the film between Marvin, Dr. Marvin and Bob, where Dr. Marvin starts out as the sane one and Bob is the one who's crazy. But then as the film goes on, Dr. Marvin is the one that becomes crazy and Bob is the one that becomes more sane. The whole stuff with Bob and the family is honestly rather heartwarming and sweet. And the dark comic bits are well utilized and really sharp and really funny and targeted well. And it's got a good tone throughout. It's not one of those things where it feels like it's wildly off the map when it comes to its tone. But that ending, it is a bit off to me. I think it's funny, the idea that Dr. Marvin snaps out of his comatose state, uh, yelling no at his sister's wedding to Bob. And then you have the whole thing with the end credits. Then you have the whole thing with the end credits where you have that text that crawls that talks about how Bob wrote a successful book and then Leo sued him over it. And it reestablished that feud between the two. But other than that ending with the out of nowhere marriage between Bob and Leo's sister, like I said, I don't really have any issues or any problems with this script. Uh, Good story, good characters, uh, really funny moments throughout that are not only really hilarious but also quite memorable. And it definitely felt like a screenplay that took you on a very worthwhile uh, uh, journey with all these characters. And it was just the kind of thing that was just very enjoyable overall. And a big part of why the film works as well as it does is absolutely 100% due to the quality of this screenplay by Tom Schulman. And of course, as with pretty much any film, you can have a good director. You can have a great script. But if you don't have the right cast, then it's not going to all come together. And what about Bob has the right cast and then some? You've got Bill Murray, who is still at the top of his game here as Bob. He was able to still provide a lot of charm and likability to this character, despite how on paper he could genuinely be very obnoxious. But because of the way that Bill played this character, there was an endearing quality about him, despite all of the stuff that he does, that, in all honesty, is less than endearing at points. And I think because of the fact that Murray is such a good actor, he was able to pull off the bits where Bob was neurotic in a way that didn't feel like he was hamming it up or overdoing it, and also finding a way to make those neurotic moments really funny because of his physical comedy and because of the way that he is able to work with the dialogue. And I know that he was a terror on the set. That is very unfortunate and it sucks. But in a lot of ways, his approach to playing this character as being a guy who is just really irritating and pushing everybody's buttons all the time, it led to a more authentic performance. So it's one of those things where I don't think the performance would be as good as it is if Bill wasn't doing a lot of this stuff. Now, do I feel he took it too far? Absolutely. But I think his approach wasn't necessarily the wrong one because it led to one of the best and one of the most memorable performances of his career, and a film that even Bill Murray has said is one of his favorites. Then you have Richard Dreyfuss, who, in my opinion, is the perfect foil, the perfect straight man to Bill Murray and his antics as Dr. Marvin. He does a great job playing the pompousness of this character, as well as his unhinged eventual progression as the film goes on, and this tit for tat, this back and forth antagonistic rivalry between these two actors on the set made it a difficult set to be on, but it really created some genuine sparks when it comes to the film itself. And it's another thing that I feel it would not really be as good as it is if you didn't have that genuine sense of rivalry between Bill and Richard. And I don't really feel that if you had different actors, you would have necessarily had the same natural animosity and the same energy. Then you have a good supporting cast too. You got Julie Hagerty, who plays Faye, Leo's wife. You've got Charlie Korsmo as Siggy. You got Kathryn Erbe, who plays Anna. The two Marvin kids. You have uh, Tom Aldridge, who plays Mr. Gutman, and Susan Willis, who plays Mrs. Gutman. The townspeople who have a grudge against Dr. Marvin. And there's a few other actors and actresses, but really, it's Bill Murray, Richard Dreyfuss, and the actors and actresses who play Leo's family that carry this, and they carry it really far. Now, what about Bob? Also features some cinematography by Michael Ballhaus. It's not the type of film that really is going to have a lot of shots that you're going to remember as being particularly visually impressive, but it works. It's something that fits for the film. It's not too crazy, but it doesn't really need to be. The same thing goes for the editing by Ann V. Coates. And the music by Miles Goodman, it's got some good spirit to it, but I think it's a little too much at points. That's just me personally. I think it could have been a little bit more subtle, but it's not a bad score. It's just a score that I think is a little bit too loud at a few points throughout the movie. A little bit too on the nose, so to speak. It got a thumbs up by Roger Ebert. It got a lot of good reviews when it came out. It was one of the biggest hits of 1991, and it was one of the more successful films that Bill Murray had at that point in his career because he was actually on a bit of a downward slide prior to starring in What About Bob? And it's a film that to me personally, I could easily watch more than once and still get the same amount of enjoyment in it. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of What About Bob? But anyway, thanks for watching my review. And as always, I'll see you later. See ya.